Hello everyone, I am Qazi Fariduddin, representing Department of Botany, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. First of all, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you for the new course, that is Plant Physiology and Metabolism. So this course was prepared by myself along with Professor Shamsul Hayat, and I had also valuable assistance of Miss Bisma Hilal and Yamshi Arif, Senior PhD Research Scholar in the Department of Botany, for preparing this course. So, basic aspect of plant-water relation, that you see that water plays a crucial role in the proper functioning of the plant. During photosynthesis, plant absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to produce carbohydrate using light energy. So, this uptake of carbon dioxide occurs through small openings called stomata that are present in the leaves, but at the same time there is a loss of water vapor through these stomata by a process called transpiration. So, in one way we can say this process is necessary to maintain proper carbon dioxide levels for photosynthesis, but on the other hand this mechanism results in water loss and poses a risk of desiccation if it is not balanced with sufficient water uptake from the soil. Now, this is very important to understand that in order to maintain the water balance and to prevent desiccation, plant absorb water from the soil through the roots and further it is translocated throughout the plant body. However, any sort of disruption in this delicate balance between water uptake and its loss by stomata, if it is disturbed, if suppose rate of transpiration exceeds water uptake, now this could lead to hydraulic failure and it is going to disturb the cellular integrity and physiological function of the plant, which are essential for the plant growth and development. Therefore, maintaining a very delicate equilibrium in the water uptake, its transport and so transpiration process within the plants represents a very significant challenge. So, in this chapter we are going to look at the ways plant handle these challenges, explore the forces and mechanism that make sure that water travels properly within the plant and between the plant and its surrounding. Now, what does plant-water relation means? So, we will be dealing with in subsequent lectures mainly the understanding the concept of plant-water relation. So, what plant-water relation means? So, plant-water relation means basically refers to the interaction between the plants and water. These interactions involve various aspects including how water is taken up by the plant cells to maintain hydration, and how it is transported internally within the plant. So, overall plant-water relation could be studied in three processes. First of all, that how plant uptake or absorb water from the soil. So, plant obtain water from the soil to address the metabolic necessities. Therefore, a large amount of water is continuously absorbed from the soil and then further moved through the plant. You see that as root hairs remain in direct contact with the soil, so these specialized structures serves as a primary site for water and mineral absorption from the soil. So, they significantly increases the surface area available for uptake and absorb water through the process of osmosis and root pressure. So, we will further dealing how water is transported inside the plant cell. So, once water is absorbed by the roots, it is transported through the plant to reach various parts such as stems and leaves. So, this transportation occurs by two methods, one involving the expenditure of energy, and if it is involving expenditure of energy, it is known as active transport, and the other does not require expenditure of energy and which is known as passive transport. So, the primary role in this process is carried out by the xylem tissues, which will be discussed in detail in my coming part of the lecture. So, how water is lost from the plant surface to the atmosphere. So for this purpose, plants use stomata, and these are the small pores found on the surface of the leaves, and from these pores water is lost, and these stomata are crucial in regulating the exchange of water vapor, carbon dioxide and oxygen. So the process of transpiration, which is basically influenced by stomata, or you can say controlled by stomata, plays an active role in maintaining water balance inside the plant. So this process is essential to prevent dehydration and support the overall physiological balance in the plant. So now let us move into each of these processes in detail. So before we actually understand the process by which plants absorb water, we must be actually aware of how water is taken up from the soil and reaches to the root of the plant. So in this, mainly water potential plays pivotal role. So now question arises, what is water potential? So water potential could be defined as the potential energy of water in a system relative to pure water when other conditions like pressure and temperature remain kept constant, or simply it is the ability of water molecules to move freely within a specific environment or system, and this water potential is denoted by a letter psi and calculated in kilopascal. But what happens, U-tube shaped tube, and one side there is a pure water, and on the right side water is mixed with solute. You see the water is mixed with solute and it is separated by a semi-permeable membrane. So the presence of solute in solution causes water potential to become more negative because these solute particles attract water molecules, thus limiting the free movement. So water potential of a plant decreases with increasing solute concentration, and thereby in this way its capacity to absorb water increases. So water potential is typically expressed in negative value because it is always measured in terms of pure water which has water potential 0. So you see in this diagram, there are two cells. On the left side you see that cell is having pure water, whereas on the right side generally cell contains presence of solute. So what happens that the water on this left side, the water potential is of course high, and on the right side water potential is less. So what is the likely condition that water will move from left side to right side, or it can be expressed that water molecules move from high water potential to less water potential. As I mentioned earlier that in higher plants water absorption occurs mainly through the root hairs. So you see these root hairs are located in the root hair zone slightly behind the tips of the root, where they come in contact with soil water, and the walls of the root hairs are composed of pectic substances and cellulose, which have a strong hydrophilic property as they allows water and other substances to pass through easily. Now the mechanism of water absorption in plant occurs through two main processes. One is passive absorption and second is active absorption. So first I will discuss what is passive absorption of water. As the name itself indicates, passive absorption does not involve expenditure of energy, and the detailed mechanism will be studied in cohesion-tension theory of ascent of sap, which also employs passive absorption for water uptake from the soil. So this process is basically driven by transpiration pull. As you see that transpiration pull causes loss of water from the leaves of the plant, which decreases the water potential in the xylem. So, a tension is created in the xylem vessel. This tension is then transmitted to below part of the plant, that is in the xylem of the roots. Now, water moves according to the gradient and facilitate absorption of water from soil into roots. So, basically what happens, that tension is created from leaves to root, from top to bottom. Tension is created from leaves to root. So, it can be said that if transpiration rates are high, it will lead to increase in the difference between the water potential of above and below parts of the plant and will lead to increase water absorption from the soil. So, passive absorption of water operates along a diffusion gradient from areas of low diffusion pressure deficit to area of high diffusion pressure deficit. Therefore, it does not require expenditure of energy. 98% of the total water absorption occurs by this pathway, that is passive absorption. So, it is considered as primary pathway for water uptake in plants. Now, at this juncture, it is worth to remember that most important to remember that here this process occurs only when transpiration takes place. So, it is predominantly occurs during the daytime and stops during the night when transpiration rate decreases. So, what happens in the night? That active absorption of water stops when transpiration stops at night. Stomata generally close. Plant still need to absorb water to maintain their physiological functions. So, what is the way out? Now, at this juncture, active absorption comes into play, and this process occurs mainly during the night time. So, in passive absorption, generally tension is created in the leaves, but in this pathway root cells play a very pivotal role, or you can say active role, in water absorption, and the driving force behind the passive absorption is basically transpiration, but in active absorption the main driving force is the root pressure, which is generally created in the living cells of the root. And movement of water occurs in active absorption against the water potential gradient, not across the water potential gradient, but against the water potential gradient. Of course, it requires the expenditure of energy as it is taking place against the water potential gradient. So, active absorption enables plant to absorb water even when transpiration is minimum or almost nil. Thus, it ensures the continued hydration and other metabolic activities taking place in the plant. So, this active absorption could be of two types. One is active osmotic absorption. So, basically this concept was proposed by Atkins and Priestley, and basically this is cell to cell osmotic diffusion that takes place. And how this pathway occurs, generally the solute concentration in the root hairs is higher than that of soil. So, what happens if solute concentration in the root hairs is higher than the soil? As a result, water potential within the root hairs decreases due to the presence of solute. So, this creates a sort of driving force for water to move from soil into the root hairs through the process of osmosis. Now, the water potential and turgor pressure of the root hairs increases as they become filled with water, or in other words it could be said it become turgid. Now, the water from root hair cells reaches to the cortical cell that are present adjacent to the root hairs, which generally will have higher solute concentration as compared to the root hairs. Therefore, water is drawn into these adjacent cortical cells from the root hairs through the osmotic diffusion. So, in this way water gradually moves towards the innermost cortical cells and reaches to endodermis through cell to cell osmotic diffusion. So, the entry of water into endodermis occurs through specialized thin wall cells known as passage cells. So, these passage cells play a very significant role in transport of water from cortical cells to the xylem elements. So, this is because other endodermal cells possess Casparian stripes. Generally, these Casparian stripes blocks the passive flow of materials into the plant's stem. Now, water passes from endodermal cells to pericycle, and then finally water moves from turgid pericycles to the xylem. And when water enters into the xylem, what happens? Generally, a positive pressure is generated within the xylem of the root, and this positive pressure can now lift water to a certain height. So, this positive pressure is basically known as root pressure. Now, other active absorption is active non-osmotic absorption of water. Sometimes what happens, solute concentration of soil is generally much higher than the root cells. So, ideally water cannot pass from the soil to root due to the lower water potential of the soil as compared to the root cell, but water absorption is mandatory. Therefore, water moves against the osmotic gradient and therefore requires expenditure of metabolic energy. So, this type of absorption of water is known as active non-osmotic absorption. There are plant physiologists, namely Bennett and Clark, Thiemann, Bogen and Prell, propose that the additional energy required to absorb water against the concentration against the water potential gradient is provided by cellular respiration. In addition to this, Kramer was also great plant physiologist, reported that active absorption of water has minimal importance in the water economy of most of the plants. Moreover, aquaporins or the proteins embedded in the cell membranes have also been reported to be associated with non-osmotic absorption of water. So, after the water is absorbed by the roots, the flow of water from epidermis to endodermis may occur through these pathways. One is apoplast pathway. So, in apoplast pathway, water generally moves through the cell walls, extracellular spaces and lumens of non-living cells such as xylem conduits, and so this pathway bypasses the living protoplast of the root cells and basically provides a low resistance route for water movement and facilitate rapid transport of water towards the endodermis and vascular tissue of the root. The other pathway is symplast pathway. So, symplast pathway, in this pathway water moves across the root cortex through plasmodesmata, and these plasmodesmata are microscopic channels that traverse the cell walls and basically connect the cytoplasm of adjacent plant cell. Now, third type of pathway is transmembrane pathway, and in this pathway generally water enters a cell from one side and exit the cell on the other side and then enter the next cell in the series. So, in this pathway generally water crosses the plasma membrane of each cell twice, once upon entering and once upon taking exit. Additionally, what happens, transport across the tonoplast which surrounds the vacuole may also involve this transmembrane pathway. So, the relative significance of the apoplast, symplast and transmembrane pathway in water transport across the root has not been fully established that which route is preferred. However, it is known that a combination of these three pathways is responsible for facilitating the movement of water. Now, as we can see in the figure that water movements through the apoplast pathway is stopped at endodermis, and due to the presence of Casparian stripes, and these are the specialized bands located in the cell walls of endodermis and impregnated with lignin, a hydrophobic polymer. Therefore, it hinders the movement of water. So, water molecules and solutes are forced to cross the plasma membrane of the endodermal cells in order to proceed further into the root. So, this is a sort of selective barrier that makes sure that substances pass through the living protoplast of the endodermis, and it regulates nutrient uptake and transport into vascular tissue of the root. Now, translocation of water beyond the endodermis occurs through the xylem vascular tissues, mainly by xylem vessels. So, in most plants, xylem constitutes the longest part of the pathway of water transport. In plants of about 1 meter height, more than 99.5% of the water is transported within the xylem, and in tall trees, xylem represents an even higher percentage of the pathway. So, this is because xylem is a simple pathway which offers a minimum to almost nil resistance to water movement. So, there are basically two main types of water transporting cells in the xylem, that are tracheids and vessel elements. So, you see on the left side of the figure that tracheids are elongated spindle shaped cells that are arranged in overlapping vertical files, and water flows between them through numerous pits present in their lateral walls as seen in the figure. On the extreme left side, vessel elements, you see that as compared to tracheids, are shorter and have perforated end walls that form a perforation plate at each end of the cell wall. Like tracheids, vessel elements also have pits on their lateral wall. So, when transpiration is low or almost absent, so of course, soil water availability is high. So, roots absorb ions and decrease water potential. So, this lowering of water potential provides a sort of driving force for water absorption into the root, and this creates a positive hydrostatic pressure in the xylem. And this root pressure has also been discussed earlier in the active absorption of water. Now, plants develop root pressure frequently and produce liquid droplets on the edges of their leaves, and you might have observed this phenomena on the certain plants like leaves of Alchemilla and this process is commonly referred as guttation, and this guttation actually takes place through specialized pores present on the leaf known as hydrothodes, and you might have seen number of dewdrops on the tips of the grass leaves in the morning, and basically these are the products of guttation which generally exudes from the small pores known as hydrothodes. Now, what is the main driver of water transport in xylem? So, this we have studied that how water is transported in small plants via root pressure, but now question arises whether this root pressure is sufficient to lift water in tall trees that are about more than 100 meters tall. So, to lift water up to a height of 100 meters, like for example in tallest trees such as coast redwood that is present in North America, whereas an eucalyptus tree that is present in Australia, and height of these trees generally exceeds 100 meter. So, in such case a pressure difference of approximately 2 megapascal is required from the base to the uppermost branch to reach water from base to uppermost branch. So, whether this roots can generate positive hydrostatic pressure in the xylem to transport water from such a large tree. So, but this root pressure is generally less than 0.1 megapascal, whereas the requirement is 2 megapascal, and this root pressure further diminishes with the transportation or in dry soil condition. Therefore, this is insufficient to transport water in such tall trees. So, root pressure generally results from the accumulation of ions in the xylem. Depending solely on this mechanism for long distance transport would further require additional mechanism to deal with these solutes once water evaporates from the leaves. Hence, root pressure is not sufficient for facilitating the upward movement of water in tall trees, mainly due to its limited magnitude. So, what happens in these conditions? So, this could be well explained by cohesion and tension theory of ascent of sap. So, generally when leaves open their stomata to take carbon dioxide to carry out photosynthesis, water vapor diffuses out of the leaves. This leads to evaporation of water from the surface of the cell walls within the leaves. As a result, what happens? Water is lost from the cell walls, causing a decrease in water potential. So, this decrease in water potential creates a sort of gradient, and due to which uppermost part of the tree experiences a significant tension, and this tension pulls the water through the xylem, which causes water to move towards the site of evaporation, that is leaves. So, to lift water in big trees, tension basically develops in the leaves, whereas in the root pressure theory we have discussed that the tension needed for transport of water which was developed in the roots. So, this is the major difference between these two theories. So, we can say that transpiration is the main driver of xylem water flow for long distance transport of water. It generates a negative pressure of around -2 megapascal at the leaf surface, and which is strong enough to lift water in tall trees. Now, we will try to understand what is cohesion and adhesion properties of water. So, water in the xylem faces a large tension and it must run in a continuous column to maintain the flow. So, this process could be addressed by cohesive and adhesive properties of water. So, what is cohesion? Cohesion is the attraction between the water molecules where they are linked to each other via hydrogen bonds, therefore creating a strong column of water. Whereas adhesion, on the other hand, that water molecules are attracted to the walls of the vessel element. As water molecules move up the vessel elements, they pull other water molecules along with them due to these properties. And it has been observed that water in the xylem can withstand tension as high as -21 megapascal, which is sufficient to counteract the gravitational force operating in the large trees. So, these tensions and differences in the water potential in the xylem are transmitted to the roots and ultimately to the soil, and thus creating a sort of soil plant atmosphere continuum that is maintained by cohesion. So, in this manner, cohesion and adhesion play a crucial role in capillary action, which enables water to move upward in xylem vessels without breaking under tension. Now, what sort of vulnerability xylem generally faces during this transport of water? So, very important aspect I will discuss, that is cavitation and embolism. Now, what happens despite the cohesive and adhesive properties of water? It has been observed that sometimes the tension in the xylem cells becomes very high and continuity of the water in the xylem stand is generally disrupted. So, this tension in the xylem element transform water into vapor state, and this sudden transformation of liquid water into water vapor results in the disruption of the water column, and this disruption in the water column is generally referred as cavitation, that is evident in this figure. So, the presence of pores in the xylem stands weakens the surface tension of water, which then leads to formation of tiny bubbles within the xylem column. So, this blocking of xylem vessels or tracheids by air bubbles is known as embolism. So, if you try to understand what is the mechanism behind this embolism, So, the first and very important reason is that what happens that during water stress and high transpiration, the tension of water in the xylem tracheids reaches very high levels that dissolved airs within the water expands to fill either the vessel or tracheid elements, and this leads to cavitation. And it has been observed that the frequency of cavitation increases during water stress due to the faster rates of transpiration. Now, during the embolism formation due to winter freezing can be observed in many plants such as sugar maple and grapevine. And what happens when the xylem is in under frozen condition and under tension, it has been observed that extensive embolism develops after melting of ice as air bubbles are forced out of solution during freezing, which expands and nucleate cavitation. So, embolism may also form in frozen vessels by sublimation, and during the biotic stress embolism can also be observed, like any sort of pathogen attack induce water stress in the host by reducing the hydraulic conductivity in the xylem, which could also lead to embolism by pathogen attack. So, in order to minimize the consequences of the xylem cavitation, plants have developed several strategies to mitigate the long-term damage caused by embolism. For example, what happens, some plants generate positive pressure, generally it is root pressure in the xylem, which can shrink bubbles and cause gases to dissolve. This is one strategy plants generally adopt. So, recent findings have suggested that cavitation is generally could be repaired even when water in the xylem is under tension. So, however, the exact mechanism is yet to be deciphered and not fully understood. And what is the another strategy adopted by the plants to address embolism? Generally, plant repair embolism by bypassing the embolized vessels and continue the upward movement of water through the adjacent unembolized xylem vessels or tracheids. As you see in the diagram that on the right side the gas is contained within a single cavitated tracheids, while on the left side gas fills an entire cavitated vessels and the water moves through the adjacent unembolized xylem. And in addition to this, many plants have secondary growth in which new xylem forms each year, and the production of new xylem conduits allows plants to replace losses in water transport capacity due to cavitation. However, extensive embolism in the xylem, such as during severe water stress, lowers the ability of plants to transport water from the soil to the leaves. So, this decrease in hydraulic conductivity of the xylem can hinder the rate of carbon fixation by inducing stomatal closure to prevent further cavitation and desiccation in the leaf tissue. Thank you very much. I will discuss the journey of water from leaf to atmosphere in my next lecture. Thank you very much.